him, boy! He's thick, boy!
Allow me to take you back to 2017 when Little Nightmares was first released. Tarsier Studios had a vision in mind for this game for a while, but didn't have a budget in order to bring it to life, so with the help of Bandai Namco, they actually have both the funding and the development power in order to give us this iconic indie series that we all know and love today. Like other indie horror games such as Limbo, Little Nightmares was certainly simple when it came to its overall premise. A silent protagonist with a simple goal of just getting to a certain area where it feels like they're being drawn to, whilst proceeding through obstacles that may perceive themselves to be a nightmare to our protagonists in the first place. The title is not only just a pun on words, but at the same time it's kind of a haunting anagram in a bit of a way. The world around Six might as well just be perceived as an actual nightmare to her, primarily because everything is out to damn well kill her in some way, shape or form. But today I'm not going to be talking about Little Nightmares. As much as I love the game as a whole, I don't know if I could describe it as well as I could without even going over its sequel, which is what we're going to be looking at as of right now, being Little Nightmares 2. Both games start similarly, but with a familiar asset in mind. You play as Mono, and you actually have this vision beforehand before going on your journey. With Six, it was the geisha lady, and with Mono, the main character you play as, it's this weird hallway that shows a door at the end of it. You find Six in this hut, which turns out to be the place of the first boss of the game, being the Hunter. I should possibly mention that each area has a particular boss that you eventually have to try and outsmart and outmaneuver in order to bypass them. Bosses like the Hunter, the Teacher, and the Doctor, just to name a few. To avoid spoilers, I won't be going any further than the Doctor in Little Nightmares 2, and I won't be going further forward than the chefs in Little Nightmares 1. Why the chefs? Well, mainly because I'm going to be comparing the two games side by side with each other, and I think the chefs are a perfect place to stop for Little Nightmares 1, because trust me when I say this, you need to play Little Nightmares. Just trust me. Part of the gameplay element for Little Nightmares 2 was both interesting and at the same time charming. Whilst playing as Mono, you and Six actually have interactions with each other to help get past certain obstacles. Six will help you jump up to higher places, distracting enemies, and even at the same time help you up from ledges. There's also this cute mechanic which reminds me of Ico, where you actually allow Mono to hold Six's hand as you traverse through the area. It's both adorable and cute, and you actually see Six and Mono's relationship as friends actually grow in the game whilst you're progressing. At the same time though, there's a new core gameplay mechanic being the combat mechanic. I'll get to that soon enough. But for the most part, the main gameplay mechanic of Little Nightmares is still there. The jumping, the climbing, the throwing things, everything is still there, and it's more lethal than ever. When I said the world around Six was a literal nightmare, the world around Mono is not as good. In fact, I'd say it's arguably worse. In fact, it can reflect two separate nightmares if you think about things long enough. Whilst everything is out to kill you in both games, in Little Nightmares 1, it's more of a passive nightmare where everything is just visually aggressive, whereas in Little Nightmares 2, it's actually an aggressive nightmare where literally everything and everything has some form of grudge against you. From enemies such as the bullies in the school to even the monstrous mass of a doctor, Little Nightmares 2 has the consistency of an actual nightmare for a kid like Mono. And as for Little Nightmares 1, it's actually a consistent haunting anagram for Six and her passive nightmares. Now at certain points in the game for Little Nightmares 2, you will encounter these TVs which Mono will interact with. These TVs are odd for Mono as they are linked to him somehow. He has the power to transport through them and to use them as pathways to get from point A to point B. But unfortunately if I go any further, that's spoiling story, so I will not go any further than that. With Six though, it's also kinda similar as she is hungry all the time in the original Little Nightmares. However, as evidence from this cutscene right here, which is both adorable, beautiful, and just damn right amazing, Little Nightmares 2 is actually a prequel to Little Nightmares 1, so yeah, we're entering the weird story progression system that Five Nights at Freddy's have. Bloody wonderful. It's often hard for me to try and compare the soundtrack when it comes to Little Nightmares 1 and 2, and heck, even Little Nightmares or games as a whole, primarily because there are usually bits and bobs in a certain game that I'll enjoy, but the rest I won't necessarily enjoy. The only game that came close was for Metal Gear Rising, and honestly, must I explain why that game is just got an amazing soundtrack through and through?
When you
And whilst the same may be true to how I feel towards Little Nightmares and Little Nightmares 2, it actually does it in a more unique way. The way you proceed forward with the game, the music accompanies you, almost as if it's a following choir in a weird circumstance. And it's even evolving with a threat of the situation that's coming up. For instance, this scene here with the teacher on her piano, it easily shows that she is docile at the moment, and when the music stops, she can easily turn into a formidable force of nature. But as soon as you get to the upper right section of the area that she's in, the music turns from that sombering piano, or the silence or whatever it is, to a sudden heart-beating race for your dear life. Honestly, I can go on forever about the music and how it flows with things, but that would just lead to spoiler territories, and unfortunately I don't want to spoil either one of the Little Nightmares games. But I will say this, the game actually reflects the phobias that are seen in the Nightmares as well, particularly megalophobia. Megalophobia is pretty much the fear of huge things, and as you can easily see in both games, you're tiny in comparison to a lot of these things, so if you suffer from a fear like megalophobia, do not play Little Nightmares. But if you're a sadistic guy who actually wants to scare yourself in that sort of manner, then Little Nightmares is perfect for you. The huge ambience that you can get from this game is just amazing, and it can easily throw you in a loop for what may happen next, or what may actually come around a corner, such as the blinding blasts of a hunter's shotguns, to eventually just finding out what may be behind those televisions. And even to finding out the mystery of who this geisha lady may be for 6 in Little Nightmares 1. Now, before I conclude with my final thoughts, I'm just going to say this about Little Nightmares. There's one small problem that I have with the game, and I really did not mean that to be a direct pun. The combat is bloody awful! I appreciate the method you're thinking there, but that's not the combat I'm on about. I'm on about this combat. Now, it's kind of simple when you think about it. You use a grab button to grab a hold of said melee item, and you press what would be the jump button to obviously hit your target. Sounds simple, right? First off, is that the registering is actually delayed. You can actually hit the action button, and by the time you actually made contact with something, you either hit them straight on point, or your item is actually halfway through its animation before it actually makes contact with something. And on some occasions, even when I wasn't recording, I got a direct impact, yet it did not register. Secondly of all is that Little Nightmares is a game where action elements should not even remotely be with. And it mainly comes with the hospital. I cannot describe how much I raged at these bloody hands in the hospital. These hands are perfectly fine as platform enemies for you to just simply navigate around and get away from. But as combat enemies, no. Just no. For starters, they move far too fast. I already have a gripe against enemies in certain games where they move way too fast for the player to keep up with. Secondly of all, they can dodge you at random intervals. And because the recharge time for your shot is so delayed, they can actually get an unfair strike on you without you even noticing. Look, with all of these things put together, all I can easily say is that the hospital is the third stage, and whilst, yeah, it should sound like you should be able to have some trouble with it, you shouldn't have trouble when your combat situation is actually small enough to begin with in the first place. This is the one common complaint I've seen a lot of people have with Little Nightmares 2, and to be quite frankly honest, I don't blame them. The combat is so fucking atrocious, I just really want to ask the guys if it was necessary to add it in the first place. At the end of the day, both the Little Nightmares games are great. I say the first one is slightly better, mainly because it doesn't have to deal with the atrocious combat system. But as a whole, if you want to experience the Little Nightmares games, I'd recommend picking them up. Little Nightmares 1 actually has a bundle pack where you can pick up some extra DLC along with it about the Runaway Boy. But in all honesty, if you just pick up Little Nightmares 1 and 2 as they are, then you're good to go. Grab your raincoats and your paper bag masks and get ready for an adventure that you will truly not forget, because Little Nightmares is definitely on a hit list of indie games that you should play. Apologies on how long it took this review to get out there, and apologies at the same time for my absence on my channel. A lot has been happening recently, mainly because of when that update drops, that's when you're getting a review.